Hi, John Bullard here. Thanks for tuning into this video. I wanted to make a video to answer a couple of questions that I get a lot. Why do I play classical music on the banjo, and how did I end up playing classical music on the banjo? Before I answer those two questions, I just want to say that I'm not criticizing any style of banjo. I love all the banjo playing styles, and this is just my opinion and my personal experience. I learned to play the banjo by learning Scruggs-style banjo playing or bluegrass-style banjo playing, and I used this book. And this is the book that I had when I was first starting out. As you can see, it's well worn. And now on to the first question: why do you play classical music on the banjo? The reason that I play classical music on the banjo is that I can sit and play pieces of music that are complete as solo pieces of music. I don't need a band. I don't need a backing track. These pieces were written for solo instruments, so when I figure out how to play them on the banjo, I can play that piece of music and it's complete and fulfilling all by itself. It's satisfying for me and fulfilling to be able to sit down and play a piece of music and be sort of self-contained as a performer. Another reason that I like to play classical music on the banjo is that the banjo's tone or timbre is ideally suited for playing Renaissance and Baroque music. It's kind of that earthy pluck of the banjo that reminds me of harpsichords and lutes and things like that. Expanding beyond solo performing into duo or ensemble playing is pretty straightforward in the classical realm. It's not too hard to find people that can come in and play parts that you have prepared for them, and that's what they're trained to do, is to sit down, read a part, and then rehearse it and be able to perform it. Moving on to how did I end up playing classical music on the banjo, this is a little bit of a personal story and my own inspiration into finding this path with the banjo. Long ago, I used to go to this vegetarian restaurant that was in the upstairs of an old Victorian building. And every time I went there, there was a classical guitar player sitting in the corner playing. It really struck me that this classical guitar player was self-contained. He didn't have a band. He didn't have anybody backing him up. It was just him sitting there playing by himself. And yet somehow the music was really complete and very satisfying to listen to. That vision of the classical guitar player being self-contained and yet very complete and satisfying really stuck with me. I think what struck me most at that time about this classical guitar player was that it seemed tactical, efficient. He was self-contained and complete. At this point, I was really frustrated with bands. I had been in a few bands and was really frustrated that there were always different levels of interest or different levels of commitment, and keeping a band on track seemed like an impossible task. I was really interested in music, and I thought if I really wanted to find a path in music, maybe I should go to music school. So that's what I did. When I got into music school, I was kind of trying to avoid the banjo because I'd had some negative experiences with stereotyping of the banjo. But one of my teachers found out that I played the banjo and asked me to bring the banjo in for a show and tell. I did that, and this teacher came up at the end of class and leaned over and asked me, "Have you ever thought about playing any Renaissance or Baroque music on the banjo? Because to me, your banjo sounded a lot like a harpsichord or a lute." And that was the beginning for me. It was pretty frustrating trying to figure out how to approach classical music on the banjo, which pieces to select, how to transcribe a piece, and all of that. But pretty soon after I started trying to do that, I ended up at the Galax Fiddlers Convention in Southwest Virginia. And at that Fiddlers Convention, I happened to encounter Fred Boyce, a fabulous banjo player, who was playing Bach on the banjo. I sat down with Fred and asked him a gazillion questions, and eventually took lessons with Fred for about a year, and that really pointed me in the right direction. I eventually did finish my music degree using the banjo to get a degree in performance. I was lumped in with the classical guitar players, and I basically did everything that they did, and I was under the umbrella of the classical guitar department. The only thing was I was using a banjo for everything. I learned a lot being immersed in the classical guitar world, and I came to really admire Andres Segovia, the famous father of classical guitar as we know it. I've spent a lot of time immersed in the classical guitar world and have studied their approach to the instrument, and I try to apply a lot of that to my banjo playing. I enjoy playing classical music with other musicians in a duo format or even larger ensembles. But my real passion goes back to seeing that classical guitar player sitting in the corner in the vegetarian restaurant. I really like that idea of being self-contained and being able to sit down by myself and play music that is complete just as it was written. I hope this has answered some of the questions about why I play classical music on the banjo and maybe a little bit about how I got into doing it. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time.